Here's the thing about decisions made at sunset. They look different in morning light. 3 weeks passed. The pond filled with water, clear and waiting. Nee's room took shape. Small, bright, hers. And every night, Diep lay awake thinking about a woman she barely remembered and a journey she'd promised to take. "Mom, when are we going to catch fish?" Nye asked one morning, rice bowl in hand. "Soon, sweetheart." Diep smoothed her daughter's hair. "Very soon." But James saw the truth in her eyes, fear wearing the disguise of caution. That afternoon, after Nee left for school, he found Diep standing by the finished pond, staring at the water like it held answers. "I've been thinking," she said without turning. "Maybe we should wait. Until after harvest. Until Nee finishes this school year. Until never?" James stepped beside her. Diep's hands twisted together. "What if she doesn't want to see me? What if I go all that way and she slams the door in my face?" "Then we come home. Simple, direct. True." "What if seeing her makes everything worse?" James took her hands, stilling them. "What if it doesn't?" And here's what nobody tells you about healing. The first step is always the hardest because it's the one where you admit you need it. "I found something." James pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket. "An address. I asked around the village. Someone remembered your mother's family, where they used to live before everything." Diep stared at the paper like it might burn her. "How did you—" "Because you needed me to." He pressed it into her palm. "Because sometimes love means doing the scary thing first so the person you love doesn't have to do it alone." The address was 2 provinces away, 3 hours by bus, a lifetime by heart. "We'll go this weekend." James said it like a fact, not a question. "Saturday morning. We'll take Nee. We'll make it an adventure for her, visiting a new place, seeing new things. And if my mother, we'll handle it together." He pulled her close. "Whatever happens, we handle it together." Friday night, Diep couldn't sleep. She packed a bag 3 times, unpacked it twice, finally sat on the floor of their small room, surrounded by clothes she didn't need and courage she couldn't find. "What am I doing?" she whispered. James sat beside her. "You're being brave." "I don't feel brave." "Brave people never do. That's what makes it brave." Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. Nee bounced with excitement, thinking this was just a fun trip. She wore her favourite dress, the yellow one that made her look like sunshine. "Where are we going, Dad?" "To visit someone special." James helped her into her jacket. "Who?" Diep knelt down, eye level with her daughter. "Someone I haven't seen in a very long time. Someone who might be your grandmother." Nee's eyes went wide. "I have a grandmother?" "Maybe." Diep's voice caught. "We're going to find out." The bus ride took forever and no time at all. Nee chatted the whole way, about school, about fish, about whether grandmothers liked sticky rice. Diep sat silent, watching the countryside roll past, every kilometre bringing her closer to a moment 20 years in the making. James held her hand the entire time. Steady, present. Proof that not everyone leaves. They arrived at noon. The address led them to a small town, streets narrow and unfamiliar. James asked directions twice. An old woman pointed them toward a house at the end of a quiet lane. "That's it." James stopped walking. The house was simple. Weathered blue paint. A small garden out front. Laundry hanging on a line. So ordinary it hurt. "I can't." Diep's feet refused to move. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." "What if she's not even there? What if we came all this way and..." The front door opened. A woman stepped out, maybe 60. Grey streaked through her hair, lines around her eyes that spoke of years and worry and time that doesn't wait for anyone. She bent to pick up something from the porch. Then she looked up and froze. Time stopped. The world held its breath. Two women stared at each other across 20 years of silence. "Diep?" The word came out broken, barely audible. Diep couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there, 5 years old again, watching her mother walk away. The woman's basket fell from her hands, vegetables scattered across the porch, tomatoes, greens, ordinary things doing ordinary roles while the world cracked open. "Diep!" She said it again, louder this time, certain, like a name she'd been practicing in secret for 20 years. James felt Diep's hand go rigid in his. He squeezed gently. "I'm here. You're not alone." "Mom?" Nye tugged at Diep's sleeve. "Who is that lady?" The woman, Diep's mother, stepped off the porch. Slow, careful, like approaching something wild that might bolt. "You?" Her voice shook. "You came." And here's the thing about moments you've imagined 1,000 times. They never happen the way you planned. Diep had rehearsed this. Angry speeches, cold questions, dignified distance. But standing here, seeing her mother's face crumple with something that looked like joy and grief mixed together, all those rehearsals disappeared. "I had a dream." The words tumbled out. "A man said he was my father. He told me to find you." Her mother's hand went to her mouth. Tears spilled over. "Your father? He passed 2 months ago. Heart attack. She couldn't finish. The silence stretched, heavy, full of everything unsaid. James stepped forward. "I'm James. This is Nee." He gently pushed Nee forward. "Your granddaughter." The woman's eyes went to Nye. Something broke open in her face. Wonder and pain and regret so deep it had its own gravity. "My granddaughter." She knelt down, eye level with the little girl. "Hello, sweetheart." Nee, fearless in the way only children can be, stepped closer. "Are you really my grandmother?" Yes, I am." Fresh tears. "You're so beautiful." "Thank you. Mom says I look like my dad, but Dad says I look like Mom." Nee tilted her head, studying this new person. "You look like Mom. Same eyes." The woman laughed, a sound caught between sob and joy. "Same eyes, yes." Diep stood frozen. James touched her shoulder. "Go on," he whispered. "Say something." "Why?" The word came out sharp. All the rehearsed speeches condensed into one question. "Why did you leave me?" Her mother stood slowly. The laughter died. Can we talk inside? Please, I'll tell you everything." "I don't know if I want to hear it." "I know, but I've been carrying it alone for 20 years. Maybe," her voice broke, "maybe it's time." James made the decision. "We'll come in, just for a little while." The house smelled like ginger and old wood. Photos lined the walls. A young couple, a baby, a life interrupted. Diep's mother moved around her small kitchen, hands shaking as she poured tea nobody would drink. "Your father and I were so young." She sat down heavily. 18 when we married, 19 when you were born. We had nothing, less than nothing, debts we couldn't pay. Diep sat across from her, James beside her, Nee exploring the photos on the wall. "When you were 5, the debt collectors came. They said we had 1 week to pay or they'd take everything. Your father..." She twisted her hands. "He made a choice. He told me to take you and run, hide until he could fix it. He promised he'd fix it. So you just Left me at an orphanage? Diep's voice went cold. No. Her mother's head snapped up. Never. I took you to my sister's house. I told her I'd be back in 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. But when I came back, tears streamed freely now. She'd moved. No forwarding address. No way to find her. She'd taken you and vanished. The room went silent except for Nee humming softly, looking at pictures. I searched for 3 years. Her mother's voice dropped to a whisper. Every orphanage, every relative, every place I could think of. Your father sold everything we had to pay investigators. We never stopped looking. 3 years? Diep's anger wavered. What happened after 3 years? We found my sister. She died. Car accident. And you... She looked up, eyes red. You'd been in the state system by then. They wouldn't tell us where. Said it was policy. Said you were in a good home and we should move on. James felt Diep trembling beside him. We never moved on. Her mother reached across the table but stopped short of touching. Your father checked every year. Called every agency, hoping, praying. And 2 months ago, when he knew he was dying, he made me promise I'd keep looking. That I'd find you. That I'd tell you the truth. The truth? Diep's voice cracked. The truth is, I grew up alone. I grew up thinking my mother threw me away like garbage. I know. Her mother's face crumpled. I know, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Nye appeared beside Diep, small hand on her mother's arm. Mom, why are you crying? Diep pulled her daughter close. Because sometimes the truth hurts, even when it's supposed to help. Her mother stood abruptly. Wait, please wait. She disappeared into a back room. James leaned close to Diep. You okay? I don't know what I am. Diep wiped her eyes. 20 years I thought she abandoned me. 20 years of anger. And now you know she didn't. Does that make it hurt less? No. James took her hand. But maybe it makes it hurt different. Her mother returned carrying a box, worn, taped, and retaped. She set it on the table with shaking hands. I kept everything. She opened it slowly. Every year on your birthday, every holiday, things I bought for you, letters I wrote, pictures I saved. Inside, tiny shoes never worn, a doll still in its package, birthday cards addressed to my daughter in handwriting that grew shakier with each passing year. Photos of a little girl at 5, frozen in time because that's when time stopped for a mother who lost her child. Diep stared at the box like it might explode. You kept all this? Every piece. Because letting go felt like losing you twice. Her mother pulled out a letter, hands trembling. This is what your father wanted me to give you. He wrote it the week before he died. The envelope was sealed. Diep's name written across it in unfamiliar handwriting that somehow looked like coming home. She opened it, read silently, tears falling onto paper that had waited 20 years to be read. James couldn't see the words, but he saw what they did to Diep, saw her shoulders shake, saw something break and mend at the same time. He says, Diep's voice barely worked. He says he's sorry, that not a day passed when he didn't think of me, that he hopes I found love, found peace, found everything they couldn't give me. Her mother nodded, unable to speak. He says, Diep looked up, tears streaming. He says he saw me once, 3 years ago, at a market 2 provinces over. He recognized me, but didn't approach because he thought I looked happy, and he didn't want to ruin that. James's chest tightened. 3 years ago. That would have been right before he met Diep, right before everything changed. He was wrong. Diep folded the letter carefully. I wasn't happy then. I was just surviving. And now? Her mother asked quietly. Diep looked at James, at Ne, at this small house full of 20 years of love that had nowhere to go. Now I have a family. She said it simply. A daughter. A man who chose dirt over diamonds to be with me. A life we built with our own hands. That's all we ever wanted for you. Her mother's voice broke. Just that. Just happiness. Nee tugged at her grandmother's sleeve. Can I see the doll? The woman laughed through tears. Of course, sweetheart. It was meant for your mother. But maybe it can be yours now. Really? Nee's eyes lit up. Really? And here's what nobody tells you about forgiveness. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments. In a doll changing hands, in a grandmother's smile, in a mother's tears that finally have somewhere to land. I can't, Diep struggled for words, I can't just forget 20 years. I don't expect you to. Her mother reached out, and this time Diep didn't pull away. But maybe we could start with today. With right now? I don't know what that looks like. Neither do I. A sad smile. But we could learn together? James stood. Nee, honey, let's go look at the garden. Give Mum and Grandmother some time to talk. Okay, Dad. Nee clutched her new doll, already making up stories. He paused at the door, looked back at two women separated by a table and 20 years and pain that didn't have easy answers. But they were talking. That was something. That was everything. Outside, the garden was simple. Tomatoes, herbs, a life lived small and quiet and full of ghosts. Dad? Nye looked up. Is Mum going to be okay? Yeah, sweetheart. James lifted her onto his shoulders. She's going to be okay. Because she has us? Because she's braver than she thinks. He smiled. And yes, because she has us. Inside, voices rose and fell, sometimes sharp, sometimes soft. The sound of wounds being cleaned before they could heal. An hour passed. 2. The sun started dropping toward the horizon. Finally, the door opened. Diep stepped out, eyes red, face exhausted, but something lighter in her shoulders. We should go, she said it gently. We have a long bus ride home. Her mother appeared behind her. Will you come back? Diep paused, long enough that James held his breath. Yes, she said it quietly. Not right away, but yes, we'll come back. Thank you. Her mother's voice shook. Thank you for giving me this chance. They walked to the bus stop together, Nye between them, chattering about her doll, oblivious to the weight of what just happened. At the corner, Diep turned back. Her mother stood in the doorway, small and alone and hopeful. Mom, Diep called out. Her mother's head snapped up. That word, the one she hadn't heard in 20 years. Next time, Diep's voice caught. Next time, maybe you can meet us at our home. See the pond. See the room James built for Nee. See the life we made. Her mother nodded, unable to speak, hand pressed to her heart. The bus ride home was quiet. Nye fell asleep on James's lap. Diep stared out the window, watching the world go dark. You did good today, James said softly. Did I? Diep didn't look at him. I still don't know if I can forgive her. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a door. He shifted Nee's weight gently. You opened it. That's enough for today. Diep leaned against his shoulder. What if she'd lied? What if the story was different? But it wasn't. But what if? Then we would have walked away. Simple, true. But we would have known. And knowing is better than wondering. The bus rolled through the night. taking them home, to a pond full of fish, to a room waiting for a little girl, to a life they chose every single day. And somewhere behind them, an old woman sat in a quiet house, holding a box of birthday cards and unmailed letters, crying tears that felt like rain after a drought. Because here's the truth about doors that open after 20 years. They let in light. But they also let in all the darkness you've been hiding from. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly what healing looks like.